From the start, the climate scare was political. It came from the environmental movement, the sworn enemy of free market industrial capitalism.
Finally, we've got them. We can claim that it is the free markets who are destroying the planet, and we need big government to save us.
The climate problem, it is said, stems from the irresponsible actions of greedy, feckless individuals who have too many babies and drive too much and consume too many products, and of the capitalist corporations who pander to their whims. The solution is for government to have greater power to regulate private companies, but also to guide and reshape the lives and habits of individuals.
Policy agenda has sprawled into micromanaging everybody's lives on the most minute detail. What kind of stove you can use, what kind of heater you can have, how much you can set the thermostat out, where you can drive, what kind of car you can't. According to the planners, we're not going to have internal combustion engines an hour from now.
All of these things require the government to get involved, right? Because the government has to sort of force changes upon the public. If it was up to the public, we wouldn't be buying electric vehicles because, you know, they're impractical.
Support for the climate alarm is now virtually synonymous with disdain for free market capitalism and a yearning for bigger government.
It's liberals versus conservatives in the United States. And generally speaking, liberals are worried that we're destroying the planet. And they're also, of course, for big government. And then conservatives are at the other end of the spectrum, where a lot of them don't believe that we're destroying the planet, and they don't want government involved in their personal lives.
Paying lip service to the climate alarm has become almost universal among those who depend on government for their livelihoods. This includes those in the publicly funded education, arts and science establishments. Tony Heller recalls his time at Los Alamos Labs.
The entire county of Los Alamos was kept going by government money. That we had the highest incomes in the state. So naturally, people who lived in Los Alamos supported big government because that was where their livelihood came from. That was where their good schools came from. You know, everything good in Los Alamos came from the government. So of course, they were all believers in big government.
Among the largely publicly funded Western intelligentsia, support for more government spending and regulation is almost a defining moral badge. In these circles, to question the climate alarm is socially unacceptable. To be a climate skeptic is taboo.
Somebody that goes against it really does get met with a lot of anger and vitriol. And, you know, you're called a denier, a science denier, and a heretic.
Your colleagues won't engage with you anymore. You don't get invited to conferences. Your students may desert you. This is all really terrible.
Professors Hendrik Svensmark and Nir Shaviv describe what happened when they published their results on the climatic effects of solar activity.
It was like all hell had broken loose because of this work. I had no idea that things would escalate as they did, and it completely changed my life.
Once we said that, people didn't like hearing it, and we became a persona non grata.
I mean, I have so many instances of people doing really nasty things. When I applied for a job, a group of scientists write to the university, say they shouldn't hire me. And that's a typical story, unfortunately.
If you don't agree with a standard polemic, you become an outcast, you're shunned, as if you have leprosy.
For Professor Sally Baliunas, the personal attacks became too much.
I retired early. And my family said I should have retired even sooner, years sooner. So they noticed the toll. It took a toll on them and me.
Dr. Matthew Wailicki was an assistant professor of geology at the University of Alabama when he decided to speak out about the climate scare. As a result of the backlash, he has decided to leave teaching.
to speak up about climate change in any sort of skeptical way was essentially career suicide, absolutely. There was no possible way that I would publish in quite a few of the mainstream journals that I was required to publish in. I essentially isolated myself from many of the funding institutions. This is one of the reasons you can build a consensus in a community, is because anybody who is skeptical of that consensus essentially gets kicked out of the community.
Speaking out in scientific ways that go contrary to the consensus, I would say is a career killer for people at the early stage of their careers.
If I were 30 years old in a university trying to make a career, I would certainly keep my mouth shut. And in fact, I went to some effort to keep my mouth shut when I was younger. I knew climate was nonsense then, but I was a little bit careful.
If a young person is questioning this, they can't put that in a proposal. The proposal will be denied, and they can't effectively publish because the gatekeeper will keep them out. And so it would end their career.
You have to go along with the global warming story. If you don't, you're going to get cut off, you're going to lose funding, you're going to get your career ruined, you're going to be trashed by the community, you'll be despised by your coworkers.
The so-called consensus on climate has itself become a weapon, a form of bullying, intimidation and censorship used against those who refuse to conform.
It's a tool that people use to bludgeon their opponents and the skeptics and to attack their character.
According to its critics, far from being scientific, the militant, intolerant climate consensus represents a devastating assault on free scientific inquiry.
I see my job as a scientist as just laying out the facts and letting people decide what they want to do. When you can't talk about the facts, things become corrupt.
If you shut the door on ideas, if you say you're not allowed to test it, you're not allowed to have that idea, you've left the realm of science.
I don't think climate researchers will ever back down from their claim that increasing CO2 is the control knob on today's climate system. I don't think they will ever back down from that, no matter what the evidence is.
It's clear it's now a cult that completely divorced from science.
But the apparently unstoppable climate scare does not just represent an attack on science. It is starting to shape for us a new kind of society,